Unbearable fumes, spreading mold. A West Memphis mother fears for the health of her children. She told Fox 13 that she has been fighting a mold outbreak in her apartment for months now.
Fox 13 Your Money investigator Kate Beery pressed her landlord on what they're doing to fix it. And she also asked about respiratory therapists and how it affects children.
A West Memphis mother has documentation that shows her child was exposed to mold. She wants her landlord to permanently remove it from her apartment.
Me and my kids deserve somewhere to live. It's not a hazard to me and my family.
This mother, who asked not to be identified for fear of retaliation, can't bear to breathe in this air any longer. She says the conditions in her home at Pine Ridge Apartments in West Memphis are making her kids sick. This document from her pediatrician shows her 8-year-old was diagnosed with an exposure to mold. Her little girl doesn't sleep in this room anymore. The smell was terrible and made us gag.
You gasping for air, and it just ain't right.
It's so bad, the little girl is now staying with relatives. Larry Hopper is the system director for respiratory therapy at Baptist.
Any exposure to mold can cause an intensive or increased risk of allergic reactions such as coughing, sneezing.
Another neighbor invited us in her apartment. She showed us what she believes are water leaks all over her home.
All these apartment complexes need to be remodeled.
We had questions for management. Could we chat about what we saw in one of your tenants' apartment complexes? It was building B in Unit 8. Did you see or smell just the mold inside?
No. Can you please cut the camera off?
Do you have no comment?
No comment.
It's just that, she's worried about her children's health. Her daughter has asthma. Are you aware of this situation?
No, ma'am.
But that renter recorded this video. She said the same woman we talked to toured her apartment this week.
You won't let your family live in a place like this, but you'll let me and my kids stay here. It ain't right.
This mother does not know the long-term effects of exposure to mold, but she does not want to find out. In West Memphis, Kate Beery, Fox 13 News.
Carissa Wedgeworth says there were leaks in her son's apartment when he moved in on August 26th.
And I moved towards the area that I heard the sound coming from and had noticed a spot that had been painted over on the ceiling. Stepped on the floor and it was squishy. It was a puddle.
Maintenance did not show up for weeks after being contacted immediately.
And on September 3rd, he realized that his dishwasher was leaking. He turned it on, walked around the side of the island, and noticed water all over the floor.
The tenant wasn't able to use his sink or dishwasher. Problems continued to get worse.
Coming home from work, washing his dishes in the bathtub, having to double clean because of showering. Reporting these issues and not having any response has been very overwhelming.
Maintenance came at the end of September and left a hole in the wall for days.
Maintenance came in and covered everything up with squares of sheetrock and plaster and paint. There was nothing treated from the mold, and we think that all of the leaks have stopped, but we can't tell just yet.
8 months prior, another tenant in the same building experienced similar issues.
I don't see how as many problems with the water, as many tenants we've talked to, ceiling collapses, mold, mildew, not being taken care of, being covered up. That's kind of common sense to be a health issue and a problem that you seem that they would fix.
The tenant's parents are hoping for a resolution.
We're hoping to get out of the lease because it wasn't fixed correctly. It was ongoing for over a month. It is to this day not fixed correctly because you can still see visible mold growth on the ceilings, walls, and trim.
And they hope getting the word out will make a difference.
Nearly a year after the superstorm hammered the state, many of the hazards Sandy left behind still remain, posing a serious threat to those rebuilding.
Well, I think the biggest thing is the folks don't realize that this isn't over. The reality is that we're still having problems throughout the state. I mean, we have black mold, we have debris removal being done.
That's why the New Jersey Work Environment Council is offering free training classes targeted for workers, volunteers, and homeowners.
The takeaway for all of this is that we want people to do the work that they're doing with cleanup and removal and rebuilding safely.
A main focus of today's class, mold, a fungus that only takes 72 hours to grow in damp places.
It's going to keep growing because the way it reproduces, it sends off spores, which are microscopic particles, and wherever they land, they can start a new colony.
Only about 10% of the population is allergic to mold.
But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be concerned, because if you tend to be a person with allergies anyway, and you get a large exposure to a new allergen, such as mold, that can easily sensitize you and you develop an allergy, or you can develop asthma.
Industrial hygienist Fran Gilmore says respiratory masks are the most important line of defense against mold. This disposable mask is the minimum protection recommended.
The reason it's minimum, the filter is the right material, that's fine. The problem is that it's not as likely to get a seal around your face, an airtight seal around your face, as a rubber or a plastic mask is.
A plastic mask like this non-disposable one. But even with the mask, gloves, goggles, and other protective gear, Gilmore says homeowners and volunteers shouldn't clean up mold infestation that's more than 10 square feet. That's because work beyond that requires specific safety equipment.
That equipment isn't really readily available to ordinary people. Besides which, the work takes training, and most people, homeowners, don't have the kind of training to do it safely.
Imagine an apartment covered with mold, bed bugs biting children as they sleep, and rotten floors too dangerous to walk on. Well, this is reality for one Warner Robins woman, and she's demanding her apartment complex do something about it. Berlinda Kennedy lives in the Savannah Apartments complex off Ignaco Drive. She claims she's living in an unhealthy and unsafe environment, and the apartment management isn't doing anything to fix it. Kennedy believes that violates her lease, and now she's refusing to pay her rent.
We have a right as tenants to live in safety, to live in comfort, to live habitable, and the law protects that.
Apartment management is in the process of evicting Kennedy because she stopped paying her rent, but she's fighting it, claiming it's an unlawful and wrongful eviction. She started a petition around the complex asking for other residents who live in similar conditions to stand up with her. Now, I spoke to Leticia Lopez, who works for Savannah Apartments, and she told me Kennedy has not gone to the leasing office to voice her complaints. And we were told late this afternoon that management did go by Kennedy's apartment and it did fix some of the problems. We'll have more on this story tonight at 11, right here on 41 NBC.
Thank you, Austin. For many of you, your walls look like this right now, halfway gutted after last week's flood. Now, while you wait for your walls to dry out, experts say toxic mold is something you should keep in mind. Our Brianne Bizette spoke with an expert for tips on how to keep this out of your home.
It's time to check for one more thing in a flooded house, and that's mold.
Before you rebuild your house, you want a person that's educated or qualified to take mold samples, to take some samples, have it analyzed by an EPA certified lab so that you have documentation that, okay, before I rebuilt my house, it was clear of any mold hazards.
Typically, every house has mold in it, which is not always harmful. But if water sits in your house for multiple days, black mold can develop.
Now, mold is an allergen, so it affects different people different ways. What affects you may not affect me. So, you know, the different types of mold that may grow may affect certain members of the household or may not affect anybody.
That's why Darlene Wren is getting her house checked out after water rose nearly as high as the electric outlets throughout her one-story home.
My anxiety level is very high. I am very allergic to mold or on allergy shots for that. And so the thought of possibly having mold that we have no control over has made me very nervous.
Home inspectors say there are even some things homeowners can do if they are nervous about potential mold growing, like removing all wet building material, turning on fans and the AC to dry it out, or use something to kill the mold.
Once you start drying it out, is use some sort of fungicide or some sort of mold killer spray on it. Bleach is not the thing to use. You want to go to Home Depot or Lowe's or any of the other stores and get a product specifically designed to kill mold.
Even if your home hasn't flooded, you can still hire an inspector to come out and check for dangerous molds that you may not be able to see with your own eyes. Brianne Bazette, WAFB 9 News.
All right, Bree, thank you. So home inspectors say that mold can start growing in just 48 hours after a building is wet.
Scattered